All right. Let's see. I got some notes I'm going to read off of for my discussions. I normally talk about autism and AI now, as well as the smokables. But I'm not going to talk too much about the smokables. It's mostly going to be autism and AI. Now, hopefully the sun won't be in my eyes the whole time, but if it is, it is. What is this? This is corn silk. I'm going to add corn silk to my mix here. Right now I've got black raspberry and grape leaves. But I'm going to mix in some of the corn silk because this stuff doesn't stay lit. I got the mix inside the cup. It doesn't stay lit. I need to add something to keep it lit. Now, I don't like cutting up the corn silk like this because it gets up into the stem. But I don't know any other way to get it mixed well with the other stuff. So, I gotta live with it. Yep. So, what is it about autism that I talk about? I just talk about the experiences. I've got two sons. One is clinically diagnosed with autism. They both have been diagnosed with anxiety. One of them we didn't go through the autism tests with him because it wasn't necessary. With one of them, it was necessary because of the school he was in. We had to figure out if we could put him on a slower paced curriculum. They went to different schools, my two sons. Based on their abilities, right? They're twins. So they're both on the autism spectrum, but only one was diagnosed. Anyway, I talk about autism because I'm concerned about them, and I've learned about autism because of my sons. But I noticed I have traits of autism. I have not been clinically diagnosed, but it's pretty obvious. And I can tell my dad has that too. And like I said, I don't presume to think that it skipped a generation with me. I know that I'm not neurotypical. Let's put it that way. So I talk about it because I think people need to, autists, they need to have certain workarounds to help them in life to avoid anxiety. It's a tremendous amount of anxiety when you don't understand things on basic levels. Neurotypicals, as they're called, don't have an issue with the obvious, but autists do. They don't get the obvious in many cases. In many cases, what's obvious to normal people is not obvious at all to people with autism. Some things that are not easily understood by neurotypicals are completely understood by people with autism, and the people with autism don't understand why they don't understand this. So it works both ways. What I discuss here is mainly what I think is necessary for a firm foundation in your understanding of life, so that you don't have as much anxiety, in the long term. In the short term, you're going to have anxiety no matter what because things get on your nerves. It's typical with anybody, but with autists or people with autism, it seems that there is no solution sometimes, and it just spirals. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Every day you wake up, what are you going to do? It wasn't solved yesterday. Today, is it going to be solved today? I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't understand it. Am I going to understand it today or not? You get into this thing where maybe it's not understandable. How terrible is it for you to live life not understanding something, ever? It's pretty bad. And you can see it with children, and I can see it with my sons. It's very, very difficult. Some things are difficult or impossible to understand, even with neurotypicals. So I'm going to try to give you foundations and understandings, and from there you can build on the foundations. If your foundations are not solid, you're lost. Now, my sons are hypersensitive to things like political ideologies. They understand philosophies. They're very into literary works. They have different interests, but they're both into reading. And it seems, I don't know if it's common, but I've seen it quite a bit, that people with autism gravitate toward books as a way to find relief, which is good. But they got to be the right kind of books, or you get all confused or led astray. Not all books are helpful, unfortunately. Even the ones that are not helpful, you can say, well, at least I know what not to do. No. I wish it was that easy. So the good things to study, in my view, are mainly texts, nonfiction texts, and learn to analyze data. I know that sounds boring. It is boring for most people. But if you can learn to analyze data, separate truth from fiction, don't rely too much on entertainment, except humor. Humor is an important antidepressant. It's probably the most important antidepressant of all is humor. But you can get into a habit of doing nothing but watching humorous stuff and never really understand life at a basic level. Okay, so at a basic level, what is life? Well, the purpose of life and the meaning of life is the preservation of life. I've said that before. That answers quite a bit. Is it the preservation of all life? Well, you have to look at each species. How does each species preserve itself? What has been the actions that they've used to preserve themselves? You look at that. It's almost like looking at precedent. You look at the established behaviors and advantageous behaviors for survival. And with humans, you look at the advantageous behaviors for survival. And those behaviors are meant to preserve lives of humans, right? Now you can say, well, isn't war and fighting and killing part of what humans have done in the past forever? Yeah. But you look at the beneficial behaviors. How do you know the beneficial behaviors? Well, you have to focus on human rights, individual human rights. Okay, all ethics and logic and reason between humans begins and ends with individual human rights. Okay? Now, I've had these discussions with my sons. They forced me to do so because they were asking me very difficult philosophical questions. So I had to dig down to the root of everything, try to come up with answers. Now, I didn't do this for myself because I was more of the type that I would force myself just to go along with this, go along with that, go along with this, go along with whatever was advantageous. But sometimes there's abuse and fraud that you fall into situations of abuse and fraud that you shouldn't be falling into because you just go along with things. You have to understand human rights, individual human rights, not the rights of a whole group. That's a different thing. I don't believe in group rights. I believe in individual rights because that's the foundation. If you preserve the individual, you'll preserve the group. You don't need any special group rights. You have to know what the difference is between rights and entitlements as well. You have to know what entitlements are and what rights are and the differences. Okay? Now, why is this important? It's important because of a concept called abuse. And it's a concept. It's very difficult to nail down what abuse is. That's why I call it a concept, because it's very difficult unless you see it. To try to define it, it's very difficult. But in order to start recognizing it, you have to understand that it's violating human rights. The violation of human rights is an abuse, and that's how we can pinpoint abuses, if it violates human rights. I'm not going to get into that here on this channel, what they are exactly, but I'll tell you the difference between rights and entitlements, because our judicial system and our system of government has it confused in many areas. Even with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, we still are confused about what the differences are. All right. I'll let this scooter pass. It's one of those DIY scooters or mopeds. Okay, so human rights are things that humans do and have done throughout history to preserve their lives, all right, to preserve their health, both mentally and physically, and to support themselves. These days we call that a financial endeavors, but in the past, without money, you would have to support yourself. Okay, so those things that you do to gain health, to preserve your life, which includes self-defense, and to gain the ability to support yourself, those are your rights. You have the right to do all of those things. Now, in the Constitution, I think it says you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Each one of those is an umbrella term. Okay, I'm breaking it down, and I'm trying to explain it like you're 5, right? Autists like these kinds of explanations, so if it's boring, forgive me. Okay, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, they are umbrella terms. Life, you have the right to life. Okay. What that means is you have the right to defend and preserve your life. Okay? You have the right to defend and preserve your life. Now, just living is just living. Yeah, you have the right to just live, but what are you doing? What does that mean exactly? You have the right to live. Well, you have the right to preserve yourself and defend yourself. All right? Liberty, what is liberty? Anything? Is it like total and complete rejection of authority? What is liberty? Liberty is the lack of constraints on your rights. Okay? Unconstrained rights. And one of those rights that you cannot have constrained is your right to gain knowledge, right? You have the right to gain wealth. You have the right to private property. All these things are part of liberty. You're free to do with your things what you want. It's difficult to break it down into simple terms in a very short period of time, but liberty basically means you are not constrained as far as your rights go. All right? It doesn't mean you have the right to do whatever you want. You are not, for one, you are not to violate the rights of others intentionally. That's abuse. Okay? You don't have the right to abuse. You have the right to use certain things, but you don't have the right to abuse. Okay. The next thing, pursuit of happiness, is another umbrella term, and what that means is you have the right to pursue your mental health, pursue your physical health, and pursue your financial health. Those three things are happiness. Happiness is not an emotion. It's a state of being physically healthy, mentally healthy, and financially healthy. It's a state of health in three areas. There might be another in there somewhere, but basically, happiness is a state of health. It's not an emotion. It's not like joy. Happiness is a state of health. So once you get those three concepts nailed down and understand those, it helps you get a grounding on what information to avoid and what information to focus on when you are autists, when you're an autist, singular, and then you need to focus on what is right and wrong. To answer those questions for yourself, you have to start with human rights. Now, I haven't got into the difference between rights and entitlements. Okay. A right is something you exercise yourself. Okay? You are the one doing it. For yourself, you don't need any help. You can get help, but you don't need any help. That's just what you do. An entitlement demands work from somebody else. If what you want to do requires someone else to do that thing for you, that's an entitlement. Like, let's say I have a right to have a house without building it myself. Well, how is it going to get built? Someone else is going to have to build it. If you think you have the right to do that, you don't. It's an entitlement. It requires someone else's labor, someone else to provide it for you. That's an entitlement. Now, the only people that definitely have entitlements are children. They're entitled to, food, shelter, and clothing because they cannot provide for themselves. And within the family, there are structures that are different from government, let's say. Within the family, there are entitlements. Okay? And those entitlements are not compensated in most cases. It's important to know or to think of entitlements as something that needs to be compensated. You need to be paid for your work. If you are providing an entitlement, you need to be paid for that or compensated in some way, unless you are providing for your child. Okay? No one pays a parent to provide for their children. They can pay someone in place of a parent, yes, as an example. Now, I don't know, maybe in some cultures parents are paid, I don't know. I think there are incentives for having children, so it's kind of like being paid to have children. You don't get tax breaks and you get extra, maybe tax credits, or maybe you even get grants and stuff. I suppose there are ways to compensate and pay parents, but normally it isn't. Okay, and it hasn't been that way throughout history. So the difference between rights and entitlements are rights are what you do yourself. Entitlements demand labor from someone else. That's the difference, okay? And in the legal system in the United States and elsewhere, they get those mixed up, especially with entitlements. Many of the rights that are listed in law as rights are actually entitlements. And it screws everything up as far as understanding what the difference is. If it requires labor from someone else, it's an entitlement. Okay, just remember that one. How do I know these things? I've read a lot of books on the subject. I've read at least 100 different books on ethics. I had to do it to answer the questions my sons were asking me. They were very difficult questions. Needed very simple answers. Like you're a 5, explain it to you like you're 5, because you have to build from a basic, very obvious foundation for an autist and then go from there. So the basic foundation of all interactions between humans, if you want to know right from wrong, you have to know what the rights are. That is the basis of all ethics. That is the basis of all law. That is moral and right and wrong. You have to understand rights and entitlements and the difference between the two. Okay? And you have to understand that abuse is a violation of rights. Now, you can abuse other things. You can abuse animals. You can abuse resources, natural resources, things that are inanimate and animate. What do you do about that in those cases? Well, first of all, abuse is wrong. But we need to live. Humans have developed in such a way that we are, like other mammals, dependent on food. We have to find food somehow. And we eat other organisms, whether they're plant or animal. We eat others. So from that framework, we have the right to feed ourselves. All right, so we can go look for things to consume. It's not wrong to eat an animal or to eat a plant. You usually have to kill it first. Okay, this is something that's very difficult for many people to wrap their heads around or to explain. But it's very obvious that we need to kill to eat. Now, you might say, well, there's minerals. You don't have to kill the rocks and salt. For example. No, but there isn't synthetic protein yet. And even if there is synthetic protein eventually, it's probably not going to be good for you. I don't care. Well, we'll see. I don't think they can synthesize protein that's healthy enough. And if they did, how do you know? How do you know if it's healthy or not? It wasn't living beforehand, so how do you know if it's healthy protein or not? If there's something jumping around like a little rabbit in your yard and it's jumping around pretty healthy, it's going to be good to eat, obviously. As long as it's healthy, yeah. And some people say, well, those animals, they want to live. Why do you want to take that away? Well, if the animal's healthy enough to want to live, it's healthy enough to eat. Yeah, that's the animal I want to eat. The one that wants to live, it's healthy enough to think that it wants to live, that's the one I want to eat. So that's your answer. All right. Almost 30 minutes. I'm revamping my philosophy channel. So I'm thinking about these two channels are getting mixed together a little bit here in these discussions. I'm going to revamp my philosophy channel. I'm thinking of deleting all the videos so far and then restarting again from scratch. Yeah. But I'll add some discussions, philosophical discussions in these videos. All right, what about AI and stuff? Actually, the corn husk is pretty good. It's still not staying lit. But I added corn husk, or no, corn silk to this. It ends up adding a lot more smoke to it. Yeah, it's good. So AI, I have discussions with AI, question and answer every week, mostly about ethics, but this time I was looking at other revenue streams that I could explore. AI is not bad in pointing out different apps that can help you make money on the side. But I said, you know what? I mean, I could start doing other things using apps, but I think what would benefit me most is if I actually learn code. I know a little bit, very little. That's 20 years old information. I got to get up to date on basic code, basic coding on websites, JavaScript stuff, and all that, so that I can actually edit websites. What else was I talking about? I'm trying to think on the fly here. The good thing is everything is on the internet now. You can learn anything you want. That's the good thing. The bad thing is it takes a lot of time. I don't want to discuss the intricate little boring details of all these other side hustles. Let's see. I keep thinking about that one person that asked me about government. I was thinking yesterday or the day before about what was the most disappointing thing that I found out. The most disappointing thing I found out about this government and all governments throughout history is that you basically have the same thing. It's the same thing over and over and over. Always the same thing. And this is what it is. You have a group of actors who are governing the mint. We don't have a government. We have a group of actors governing the mint. Basically, it's all about governing the mint. It's not government, it's governing the mint. Okay? This is as basic as I can get. Now, those that govern the mint have control of the money. And with that money, they pay mercenaries. It's been that way forever. Mercenaries to stay in power, in order to stay in power. The mercenaries are usually the types that have no stomach for what it takes to be an actor, or a politician, in other words. They don't have any stomach for politics. Politics is the gaining of influence by any means other than merit. Okay? Usually the military types and the strong arm types rise in the ranks according to their ability and their merit. They don't rise in the ranks of their profession by bragging or coming up with alternate realities. They have to be firmly grounded in reality and be proficient. And you don't have to be in the military to be a strong arm. You can be highly knowledgeable in how to use plants medicinally. You can be highly knowledgeable in how to make various things. It's skill. The skill is usually paid by those who are in control of the mint, or anything of value. There are always those types, and they happen to be the same types that do have a stomach for politics, that will control the wealth, and they will stop at nothing. They have to be destroyed in order for them to stop, and they admit that to everybody. You're gonna have to kill me if you want to stop me. Yeah, that's the way they operate. So they force you into a situation. What are you going to do? You're going to kill me? What are you going to do? You can't do that, can you? Well, that means you can't stop me. And that's how they operate. So it's the most disappointing thing I've ever discovered in government. I figured it was mostly merit-based. No. So that's why government power has to be very closely controlled by the population. If the population is not in control of their government, the government will definitely be in control of the population. So you're going to have one of the two. Which one do you want? You have to have government of some sort. You have to have a governing of the mint of some sort. Somebody has to be able to secure the wealth of the country or the group or the individual. Someone has to be able to protect it. The same with something has to be able to protect the rights of people who can't protect themselves. So we have to have some sort of structure set up where we pay professionals to help us and to protect us. We just cannot allow mental illness to creep in. But mental illness is completely mixed in with the political types. We don't know how to get rid of that problem. We still haven't figured that one out. All right. I don't know if this stuff is getting to my throat or what. Anyway, I added some corn silk. It stays lit a little bit better, but not that much. What else can I add in? The sun's about to come out right into my eyes. Yeah, I can't think clearly with the sun. See that? It's starting to come through the trees up here. There's some shade from that tree, but not much. All right, so that's it. Yeah. I think I've covered what I wanted to cover for this particular episode. It is the past 30 minutes. All right. Okay, there you go. Hopefully that wasn't too boring. That's it.